The tender tale of Sweeney Todd. His skin was pale, his eye was odd. He shaved the faces of gentlemen who never thereafter were heard of again. He trod a path that few have trod, did Sweeney Todd. The demon barber of Fleet Street.
The demon barber of Fleet Street who slit the throats of his customers and sent them down through a trapdoor to be fresh meat for Mrs. Lovett's pies. It's all meant to have happened here at number 186. Well, whether or not that's a true story or a creation of popular fiction, Sweeney Todd, surely Britain's most industrious serial killer, is now best known as the hero of a groundbreaking musical by the greatest living composer-lyricist, Stephen Sondheim.
What struck me as remarkable was the amalgam of comedy and melodrama. I'm a big melodrama fan. I like blood and thunder plots.
You want to scare the audience?
I want to scare the audience, yeah. I love being scared in movies and plays, and music's the way to do it.
Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd is horrifying, but it's also charming, and it gives you the frisson of wanting to be scared, but being scared of being scared.
It's always morning in my mind, my little lamb, my pet.
In one famous scene, Sondheim brilliantly combines bloody slaughter with a love song, in which the barber remembers his lost daughter, Joanna.
You stay, Joanna, the way I dream you are. Oh, look, Joanna.
He is killing people, but he's singing a very beautiful melody, and there's nothing in the accompaniment to indicate the murder that's happening. Sondheim is extremely good at juxtaposing those sort of contrasts, and there's a lot of irony in his work, which I think is one reason it appeals to British people.
Sondheim has proved especially popular in Britain, and he has often attended rehearsals in this country.
The other thing, Maria, again, not only should you pronounce what, but also hold it a little longer. Don't make it quite so short. So what?
I do, without any doubt, think he's today's Shakespeare in terms of musical writing. All his subject matters are eternal. They are full of humanity and questions. They're both clever and funny, moving and sometimes frightening, and theatrical. That's the thing. You know, he writes specifically for theatre.
Born and raised in New York City, Sondheim got his big break when he was hired to work with composer Leonard Bernstein on the lyrics for West Side Story, a contemporary version of Romeo and Juliet.
When you're a jet, all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day.
Sondheim's witty and biting use of language helped this vivid portrait of street gangs become a hit on stage and screen.
You're never disconnected. You're home with your own. When company's expected, you're well protected. Then you are set with a capital J, which you'll never forget till they cart you away. When you're a jet, you stay up.
West Side Story, though it was innovative in terms of stage techniques, and in terms of the blending of the various elements, was tell the story in chronological order. Well, after you've done a couple of those, I started getting restless. And I was lucky enough to meet another man who feels exactly the way I do, which is Harold Prince, and we formed this partnership.
In their first collaboration, Sondheim and top Broadway director Hal Prince broke new ground with Company. Dispensing with a story told in chronological order, they created a multi-layered musical about a 35-year-old New Yorker, Bobby. As a single man, he's under pressure from all his married friends to join them in making a commitment. But the final song, Being Alive, leaves the matter open.
Someone to hold you too close, someone to hurt you too deep, someone to sit in your chair to ruin your sleep.
During the course of the musical, he finds a realization that he can't be alone, but he doesn't need to be married, perhaps. And I think there are a lot of different interpretations about it, but it's certainly a very sort of life-affirming piece.
Someone to crowd you with love, someone to force you to care, someone to make you come through, who'll always be there, as frightened as you of being alive, being alive.
Years ago, they always finished with a wedding, didn't they? You know, musicals. Whereas with his work, it could be anything, really. There could be any subject that he's going to write something about, and you're going to get completely carried away and taken away with the story.
Because you'd never accuse him of being frothy, would you, or saccharine?
Absolutely not, no. The word that keeps coming into my head is challenging. I don't think you can ever sit back on any of his music and think, yes, I know this, you know, because there's lots of tongue twisters and it's quite complicated. And but when it works, oh, it's just extraordinary. Broadway, baby, slaving at the 5 and 10, waiting for that great day when I'll be in a show. Broadway Baby is in the musical Follies, and it's a wonderful song about somebody who's starting out in the business, and of course we all aspire to be on Broadway.
I do believe the content dictates form and content dictates tone. And if you choose to tell that story, you tell it that way. And if you choose to tell that story, you tell it that way. And what Hal and I like to do is take that story and nothing in that area, now we'll tell a story over here, and find ways of doing it. That's exciting.
Sondheim's collaboration with Hal Prince had led to the huge successes of A Little Night Music and Sweeney Todd. But in 1984, he changed direction again. This time, working with playwright James Lapine, he devised a musical with virtually no plot and no dance numbers. And the subject was a painting. Sunday afternoon on the Isle of the Grande Jatte and the life of its obsessive creator, Georges Seurat, were the inspiration for Sunday in the Park with George.
It's a show about speaking from the heart and speaking, creating art in a way that is meaningful to you and not worrying about external influences.
And as a performer attacking a role like that, how do you go about that?
Well, it's a nightmare, to be frank. It's a nightmare because there's so much of it. It's big. There are certain songs that are terribly difficult to learn, and but weirdly, once you get them, then they feel very easy, and you can't understand why it was so hard to learn them. But there's one song in particular, for example, Colour and Light, where he's painting and making little dots. And Stephen's written it in a way that the music completely, so it's red, 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 orange, red, red, orange, you know, so you feel like you're going insane.
More light, color and light. There's only color and light, yellow and white, just blue and yellow and white. Look at the air, miss. See what I mean. No.
He creates a world for every show, and he's very aware of harmonies and accompaniment figures and crafting them to the specific situation. And he discovers harmonies that you just can't believe. His models, I think, were the early 20th century composers, particularly Ravel and Prokofiev. But he's gone way beyond that, and he's married that sort of technique harmonically and accompanimentally to the American popular song. So you have fairly simple melodies going above very complex structures underneath. And it enables him to create a different sound for each of his shows, which is specific to that situation.
The world of fairy tales and nursery rhymes formed the subject of Sondheim and Lapine's next collaboration, Into the Woods. They mixed up characters from the Brothers Grimm to demonstrate that living happily ever after is never easily achieved.
Songs like Agony are rich in the composer's special strain of irony.
High in her tower, she sits by the hour, maintaining her hair. Blithe and becoming, and frequently...
Into the Woods is a great witty work, I think. You have these two princes, Rapunzel's prince and Cinderella's prince, and they're both sharing their own agony because they're in love with these women who they can't have. And they're sort of competing in their agony. So one thinks his agony is worse than the other, so there's a sort of great one-upmanship that's happening. But at the end, they're terribly polite, you know, also quite noble and very polite. And no, actually, agony is different for each. We're each going through this awful thing, but it's different.
Agony, glycerine! Whoa, no, it's different for each.
Always 10 steps behind,
Always 10 feet below, and she's just out of reach.
It's very rare to have someone writing the lyrics and the music. There's no substitute for that, really, because a lot of the time you listen to musicals and the lyrics are sort of jammed onto the music, or vice versa. And there's such a good symbiosis, I suppose, with the two in his work. And his mind is he's just so clever. But also, there's such a depth of feeling to it.
Careful the things you say, children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see.
As a mum, which is the thing I've cherished the most in my life, this song means a great deal because it's about being very careful with what you say. Words are powerful things, and misused, they can destroy. Yeah, when you listen to the lyric, I mean, it absolutely, it's one of those ones which is quite hard to sing.
What do you leave to your child when you're dead? Only whatever you put in its head. Things that your father and mother had said, which were left to them too. Careful what you say. Children will listen.
I think this is probably the most autobiographical song. His relationship with his mother wasn't great. She was very unkind to Steve, and I think it's been the driving force behind him making such great relationships with the people he works with, the loyalty he displays.
My mother was something of a monster. She was an extremely selfish, and her values were entirely material. Money and celebrities are what interested her. And she did not want to have children, and I'm an only child, and I think it was an accident. When my father left her, she took her anger out on me. But my life was saved by the family of Oscar Hammerstein and his wife. They had a son my own age, and so I was sort of osmosed into the Hammerstein household, and they became my surrogate parents and emotionally saved my life.
Sondheim had the good fortune of not only being born a genius, which you can't explain, he was just born a genius, but he also had a mentor in Oscar Hammerstein II, who wrote with Richard Rodgers many of the great musicals of the 1940s and 50s, Oklahoma, Carousel. And Sondheim went to the premieres of many of those shows. I think he went to the premiere of Carousel and wept into Dorothy Hammerstein's fur coat, ruining it forever. And then went on to find his own voice very individually in the 1960s. So his legacy carried on, through the 70s and the 80s, and he was still writing in the 90s, and he's still writing now.
Stephen Sondheim celebrated his 80th birthday on the 22nd of March this year. And on that very night, he received a special surprise present. A Broadway theatre is to be given his name.
They are renaming the Henry Miller Theatre the Stephen Sondheim Theatre.